Welcome back, fight fans. This video is brought to you by AB Combat. These 10 fighters got some pretty swift comeuppance for their actions. Whether they talked a little too much trash, made enemies with the wrong guy, or simply played games inside the cage, here are 10 instant karma moments in MMA. Ricky Bandejas versus James Gallagher. Look, there's certainly more to James Gallagher than his reputation as a bargain bin Conor McGregor, but in his early days, it was clear to see that he was leaning on the McGregor connection a bit too much. And when he came up against Ricky Bandeja, all of the taunting he did pre-fight came back to bite him immediately when Bandeja managed to drop him hard in the first round. Visibly stunned, Gallagher tried to circle away, but was caught with a legitimately crazy sweet chin music that Shawn Michaels himself would have been proud of. Seriously, this was a KO pulled straight from the pages of a WWE script. A viral knockout and an undeniably embarrassing one at that. Douglas Lima versus Michael Venom. Speaking of a viral KO, the Bellator superstar Michael Venom Page has had more than a few entries to his highlight reel. But when the time came for him to take his flashy striking style and put it to the test against Douglas Lima, yeah, the wheels certainly fell off. MVP did everything he could to get into Lima's head pre-fight, even taunting him at the final fight or face-off. And despite having some early success, Page fell victim to a beautiful sweeping leg kick that knocked him off his feet, leaving his chin totally open to a massive hammer blow from Lima. It was an instant KO and a viral moment that certainly left Page back at the drawing board. Jorge Masvidal versus Ben Askren. As soon as the fight was signed, it was clear that Jorge Masvidal and Ben Askren were never going to get along. As two polar opposites who clashed immediately, they butted heads constantly throughout this fight's build-up. Askren decided his best route would be to try and belittle Jorge's intelligence, and for the weeks that led up to their bout, that's exactly what he did. Unfortunately, this lit a fire under Masvidal to make an example of Askren, and on fight night, a 5-second KO did exactly that. An embarrassing defeat for Ben Askren, one he never fully recovered from. Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor. Depending on how you look at things, Conor McGregor had this coming for a number of reasons. Indeed, he did overstep the line with his trash-talking multiple times in the past, especially with Dustin Poirier and Khabib Nurmagomedov. But for our money, the fact that he was blatantly grabbing the gloves of the Diamond as they grappled just seconds before his leg gave out from underneath him? Yeah, that's some instant karma in effect, folks. A nasty injury. But let's be real, also a pretty nasty set of tactics. Henry Cejudo versus TJ Dillashaw. Do we call this instant karma for TJ Dillashaw for all of his trash talk, or for the overconfidence he had in thinking he could fight at flyweight? No, while all of those reasons are factors, we'd prefer to give Henry Cejudo's first round KO extra credit due to the fact that Dillashaw was an EPO. His post-fight test results would confirm as much, making him an even greater villain in the eyes of the masses. Whether you love or hate Triple C, you gotta give him props for this one. Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Dylan Dennis. Talking smack to someone while there's a full octagon between you might seem like a good idea, but when Team McGregor member Dylan Dennis decided to shout insults at Khabib Nurmagomedov just seconds after he had beaten Conor McGregor at UFC 229, even he must have been surprised by the outcome. Instead of brushing off the attack and focusing on his celebrations, the Eagle vaulted over the side of the cage, diving into Conor's corner, inciting a full-on brawl between the two teams. Even Dennis looked shocked as he watched Nurmagomedov flying through the air, one of the craziest scenes in MMA history. Ben Nguyen versus Julian Wallace. Just because you have a bunch of tough-looking tattoos, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a good fighter. And for Julian Wallace, his attempts to intimidate his opponent Ben Nguyen during the pre-fight build-up completely and utterly failed. Sure, Wallace had the look, but Ben Nguyen was a legitimately good fighter who was on his way to the UFC by the time this battle happened. Or we say battle, but in reality, Ben was able to KO his opponent in just 25 seconds. All that trash talk and failed intimidation tactics came to nothing in the end, making Wallace a viral sensation for all the wrong reasons. Jorge Masvidal versus Leon Edwards. Another trash-talking story comes in next, as the future UFC welterweight champion Leon Edwards managed to provoke the wrath of Jorge Masvidal backstage at UFC London in 2019. Both men had just scored big victories in their respective fights, Leon over Gunnar Nelson and Jorge over Darren Till. With both guys occupying spots in the welterweight top 10, tension started to flare when Leon decided to fire some verbal shots at Jorge while he was in the middle of an interview. Masvidal, being Masvidal, didn't take too kindly to this, and instead of trying to fire back with words, he literally walked over and unloaded a 3-punch combo on Rocky, and with that, the 3-piece and a soda was born. Chris Weidman versus Anderson Silva. Look, we love Anderson Silva, and we understand that his career was set out in a certain way, where his playful approach to fighting was the thing that made him so good at times. But when he made the mistake of taunting Chris Weidman mid-fight, he paid for it with his championship belt. Again, Anderson's approach to high-stakes fighting often involves him bringing an element of fun to the table, but when he tried it against Weidman, boy, were the results shocking. And in truth, he never did fully recover from this one. Joe Harding versus Johan Sega. And finally, we come to perhaps the most famous example of a fighter getting his just desserts that you'll ever see. It's a very famous example, yes, but the two guys involved are total unknowns on the MMA scene. Joe Harding was coming off of 2 straight losses at amateur level, but he was fighting like a man who was totally untouchable. Fortunately, he got his dose of instant karma courtesy of a brutal head kick from Johan Sega, one that put his lights out immediately, a harsh lesson on the rough realities of the fight game.
By just waiting for Joe to do something.
And then there was some viciousness in the ground and pound.
Thanks for watching, fight fans. We'll be back soon.